let's talk about the unstructured case interview. Over the next few minutes, we're going to break down what is an unstructured case interview. What's different between this and a normal structured interview? Who likes to use these, and when are you most likely to see it? And how should you prepare? The unstructured case interview is something that is most often given to you in a final round interview. All firms like to use it, but ZS Associates is one where you would especially expect to see it. The final round interview is often given by a junior partner, or director within that firm. And an unstructured case interview can be a very short prompt, opening up a wide-ranging discussion with your interviewer. If you've heard us talk through the case interview anatomy, then you know that the structured standard case interview follows a really standardized approach. You get a set of background information through the background prompt up front from your interviewer. You then recap and go into some clarifying questions about the case and objective, then moving into the structure component of the case, where you can utilize core business frameworks, core principles, to be able to brainstorm all the areas that you want to investigate. If you start from the strong foundation of Management Consulted's core frameworks, you're starting from a simple but strong base of business truths and core business frameworks upon which to build your structure. However, an unstructured case interview doesn't give you as much information up front. It gives you an open-ended question that starts a discussion. An unstructured case interview, your interviewer may have no information in front of you to go through. They may have no data to share with you, and it often does not have a core quantitative portion to the case. Your interviewer in an unstructured case interview is trying to engage you in a dynamic, problem-solving, brainstorming conversation. In an unstructured case interview with an open-ended question up front, you should still maintain the same principles as a structured case interview. You want to demonstrate clear structure and organization in your thinking. You want to problem solve towards an answer that makes sense. If and when there's math components, you need to do the math accurately and quickly. And you need to communicate along the way with executive presence, talking the interviewer through your thought process, having poise, gravitas, engendering trust with them, speaking with executive presence and clarity. However, the conversation may feel different. It may feel more like a back and forth engaging conversation. They don't have individual prompts that they're moving forward one to the next. There's not different parts of the case that you're trying to unlock. They're just starting an open-ended discussion to see how you think about and how you would engage with a certain business problem. The partner or director giving you one of these questions, it may represent something that they've worked on themselves in the real world. And so they may have their own internal answer key, so to speak, and want to see, well, how would you think about and approach this hairy, ambiguous, complex problem? How does that compare to the way that we did it in the real world? And then the interviewer may inject into the conversation some new pieces of data and information saying, well, okay, those were some great things. That is what we did in that part of the project. What would be some extra things that you could think of? Or they may give you some pieces of data and information, tell you how the client reacted to a certain idea that you came up with. Or it could be completely hypothetical. But the unstructured case interview doesn't follow a standardized game plan. Now, we all know that any case interview doesn't come with an answer key. The only portion of a structured case interview that has an answer key is the math component. When the interviewer has specific data to give you and specific calculations they want you to complete, then there are correct answers to the math component parts, and they want to compare your answers to the answer key. The entire rest of the case interview does not have an answer key, and this truly and fully comes to life in an unstructured case interview. I had multiple unstructured case interviews in my final round interviews with McKinsey. Questions like, Hey, tell me how you would think about starting a restaurant in Chicago. No other background information, no data for me to take in, and the interviewer may have just made up that question on the spot. Yet that is the starting point to the next 30 to 45 minutes of discussion for you to dive into, how might I approach this? How can I structure and provide organization to my thinking? How can I problem solve towards a solution, an approach, an answer that makes sense? How can I communicate with confidence and executive presence? We're still testing the same evaluation categories. We're still wanting you to see that you demonstrate the same skills and qualities and traits that we're looking for in the structured interviews. I'm looking at and thinking about how you would be internally as a consultant. Are you going to be a good, active, collaborative team member? Are you going to be able to think on your feet, brainstorm on the spot? Can I picture you in the team room in front of a whiteboard, coming up with new ideas, processing through how to approach a particularly hairy, ambiguous, complex problem? I'm also looking at and thinking about whether or not you're ready for that external part of the consulting role. Can I see you being a client advisor, talking a client through our thinking, leading them to conclusions and sharing your insights, helping align a disparate group of stakeholders around a particular set of recommendations? Can you still process in the moment? Can you think through a problem and do that in a way that I can follow your train of thought? Are you being clear and explicit with stating your assumptions and the way that you're thinking about things? Are you keeping the conversation in a dynamic, engaging tone? Are you allowing pauses in your speaking so that the interviewer can inject themselves into the conversation? In an unstructured interview, you are allowing that to be a dynamic conversation that flows back and forth between your interviewer. They're going to want to ask you specific follow-up questions. It's largely going to be based on what you share. They may challenge you on some of the ideas that you give. They may ask you, to sidestep for a second and do some creative brainstorming. The principles of how you practice for an unstructured case interview remain consistent with the way that you practice for a structured case interview. You should go through structured case interviews trying to be better and better on your structure, problem solving, and communication. You can utilize the skills that you gain practicing for structured case interviews in the unstructured setting. First thing to do is just recognize that these unstructured case interviews exist. And there may not be a game plan for the way that the interviewer wants to take the conversation. Through practicing in a dynamic, live way in your case partner practice, you should have already been practicing immediately launching into conversation and keeping the conversation around the case interview in a discussion level, engaging back and forth. You should still try to maintain that in your structured case interviews. By doing so, it'll feel more a natural transition as you move into this even more ambiguous, unstructured space. Then you want to be very careful and clear in an unstructured setting to make sure that you are communicating at an effective pace and allowing the interviewer to interject themselves into the conversation. Your interviewer does not want to ask you one upfront question in the unstructured case and then hear you present on it for the next 30 to 45 minutes. They will interject other follow-up questions, other small challenges into the conversation, and they want to see how you respond, assessing you on whether or not you're ready to be that internal collaborative team member and whether or not you're ready to move into that external client advisory role. So in preparing for unstructured interviews, you want to make sure that you are engaging in dynamic conversation with your interviewer, even as you're practicing structured interviews. You also may decide that you want to get a full simulated experience practicing the unstructured case interview with someone who's given one of those questions before in the interview setting. We here at Management Consulted have on staff a set of case coaches who are all ex-McKinsey, Bain, or BCG interviewers and can help you actually simulate this experience. It's something that you should know is out there. You should prepare for it in the sense that you maintain that active conversation with your interviewer, whether or not you receive a structured or unstructured case. You're most likely to receive this in the final round from a partner or director at the firm. It could be a hypothetical situation. It could be something from the real world, but you're still going to maintain the same principles and go for the same core best practices as you would in a structured case. You can still assert that you're going to take a couple of minutes to think through your approach at the beginning of the conversation. You can still present your structure and your approach back to the interviewer. And then you flow dynamically with how they want to take the conversation. And if they nudge you to lead the conversation, you march systematically through your structure to be able to talk through the different things you would want to investigate in the way that you created your structure. You wrap up the conversation when nudged and prompted towards the end with some type of summary and recommendation. All those core elements can still exist. And that's how you tackle an unstructured case interview.